Okay, we're going to get ready for part 2 on our talking about evaluating expressions and simplifying by order of operations. So what I'm going to focus on here is the difference between finding the power or the exponent when you have whole numbers that are positive and whole numbers that are negative, and just looking at the different types. So I'm going to work through a couple here and explain them, and then we're going to work through some together. So first off, remember that if you have 6 cubed, that it does mean 6 times 6 times 6. And so you would need to multiply that out. 6 times 6 is 36, and 36 times 6 is 216. Okay, and you could use your calculator to multiply that out. And I do know you can also use your calculator to do 6 cubed on that. Now, number 2 and number 3 are two in particular that I really want to talk about, because it does make a difference whether or not you have parentheses. Okay, so when you have number 2, what this really means is the opposite of 2 to the 6. So this is going to give you a negative answer. And so when we take 2 to the 6, okay, so this is what we have. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times another 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64. So 2 to the 6 is 64, but it says negative, okay, or the opposite of, okay? So that's what that means. So when there is a negative out in front of a number, but no parentheses, okay, there's the key, no parentheses, then it means the opposite of whatever they give you. And that number is going to be the negative. Okay? Now then number 3, though, is different. There's parentheses around it. So that's telling you that the negative will go with the 2. And so this one actually means a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2, negative 2, negative 2. How many do I have there? 5. One more. 6. And so it's still going to give you the 64, but remember that a negative times a negative is a positive. And then a positive times a negative is going to give you a negative. And a negative times a negative, again, is a positive. Negative times positive, or positive times negative is negative. And a negative times a negative is positive. And so in this case, this one will be a positive 64. Okay? So again, the key here is that if there are parentheses around it, the negative is multiplied exactly the same number of times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? But if there is no parentheses, then the negative is just out in front. Okay? It means the opposite of. Number 4, 7 squared, of course, is just 7 times 7, which is 49. So one of the things that I am going to ask you to do on this assignment as you do those is I do want them written out. Okay? So just like what I did. Okay? So we're going to go through a few more, and as we do these, I do want you to pause before I do them and see if you can work it and see what you get. Okay? Don't count on just me doing it. You need to pause the video, see what you think, and when you feel comfortable with your answer, then you can continue on. Okay, so please note in your book, again, and you should be doing these in the in the notes section. So along with our notes that we did, and I didn't tell you that at the beginning, but anytime we do the I do's and we do's, those all go in your notes as examples that you can look back at. Okay, so number 6. Try that real quick and see what you get. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work it out. And what this means is 2 times 2 times 2, because again, I want you to write it out. Oops, okay. So my computer screen kind of messed up there for a little bit. So 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2. And again, you would just go ahead and multiply that out and get 8. So 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, number 7. Try that on your own and see what you get. Okay, so hopefully you recognize that number 7 was similar to number 2 that we had done. And so what this actually means is the opposite of 3 to the 4th. And so my answer is a negative, and then I only multiply the 3. My answer is going to be negative. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81. Okay? Number 8. Again, try that on your own. Okay, so number 8, since there's parentheses, that means a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3. So a negative 3 times a negative 3 is going to give you 9. 9 times a negative 3 is a negative 27, so we're just running our order of operations again. And then negative 27 times 3 is going to, okay? So look at the difference there. If I have a negative 3 to the 4th, again, it means the opposite of 3 to the 4th. 3 to the 4th is 81, so that says the opposite of 81 is a negative 81. Where this one says a negative 3 to the 4th, which is a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3, negative 3. And I expect that you'll be able to explain this to me and again, write it out as I did. Okay, I want you to go ahead and try. Okay, so hopefully on number 9, it's simply just 5 times 5, which is 25. So that one's not too hard. Okay, go ahead and do number 10. Okay, so number 10 again, there's no parentheses. That's a key, no parentheses. So this one again means the opposite of 2 to the 6. So I'm going to have a negative and then 2 times itself 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. Okay, and we did 2 to the 6 up above, so we know it's 64. That's a negative 64. So if you remember that from before. Okay, now I'm going to leave that one on there. Go ahead and do the next one real quick. Okay, so again, there's no parentheses. So this just means the opposite of 2 to the 3rd. So it's a negative, and then 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So I've got a negative 8 as an answer. Okay, and then go ahead and get the last one done. Okay, so this one has parentheses, so it means a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2. So a negative 2 times a negative 2 is 4, and 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to take a look at something real quick. Let me clean this up. Okay, and then we're also going to go back to the first set. So I'm going to scroll back down, and I just want you to take a look at what we did earlier, and you can look at your own. And I'm going to clean off a little bit of this so it's not quite so messy. Okay, is that when I had a negative 2 to the 6, This answer was a negative 64. Okay, you can go back in and double check up above on your number 2. And when I had a negative 2 to the 6 with parentheses, that was a positive 64. So these were not the same, okay? Not the same. Okay, not the same answer. One was positive and one was negative. Okay? So just look at that. Now we're going to go back down to what we just had. Okay? So let me get this one lined up here. Okay. So again, I'm going to just erase this a little bit, and here's our answers over here, and you can check me to make sure I copy my answers correctly. But what we just found out was that a negative 2 to the third, which means the opposite of 2 to the third, okay, the opposite of, so a lot of times you'll say a negative 2 to the third, but it's almost like you need to pause between the negative and the 2 to the third. So I like saying the opposite of 2 to the third. The answer was a negative 8. Okay? And then when we had the negative 2 in parentheses, which meant a negative 2 times a negative 2 times a negative 2, it was also a negative 8. So in this case, the answer was the same. Okay? And so my question to you is, can you come up with a pattern of when these two will be the same and when they will be different? So there they're different, and here they're the same. Can you come up with a pattern? Okay? So we're going to finish. I'm finishing with this here. And so what you need to do in your notebook as your assignment, and then we're going to grade it next class period and go over and talk about it. We're going to use the number 5. Pay close attention. Is there parentheses or not? Remember, if there's no parentheses, let's write this down. If there's no parentheses, it means the opposite of whatever you're finding. Okay? If there are parentheses, then the sign, how do I want to say it, stays with the number. So in other words, you would write it, in this case, a negative 5 times a negative 5. In this case, you're going to put it opposite of 5 times 5, okay, just as an example. And some people like put in this piece in parentheses. I'm not going to tell you to add in parentheses, but they remember that negative out in the front. So that's what you're going to do. You need to do 1 through 7, okay, 1 through 7. And especially the number 7, which is what I just asked you to do. And we're going to talk about this with a partner, so you come up with your own pattern that I asked you about earlier, and then you're going to discuss it with a partner and see if you guys agree.